Welcome to Innovation and Leadership in the Navy, today's session of the Rutgers Business School Signature Leadership Series. Today's webinar is offered in valued partnership with Tech United NJ, and we thank them for their support. The Rutgers Business School Signature Leadership Series is a learning opportunity that brings our audience lessons of resilience, resourcefulness, responsibility, and reinvention through conversation with thought leaders and business leaders from across industry spectrums. I'd like to begin by telling you a little bit about today's presenter. Margaret Palmieri is a special assistant to the Vice Chief of Naval Operations. She's previously served with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Action Group, the Navy Digital Warfare Office, the Office of the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare, the Chief of Naval Operations Strategic Action Group, and the U.S. Fleet Forces Command. Through past assignments, Margie has gained broad experience ranging from strategy implementation and change management to advanced analytics and artificial intelligence, with uses in projects, concepts, and capabilities for warfighting and readiness applications, and much more. Margie is a two-time Rutgers alumna, having earned her master's in public policy and bachelor's in political science here at RU, and an additional master's in systems engineering management from the Naval Postgraduate School. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator. Ann Treadway is an Army veteran who proudly served 2 tours in Iraq. In her role as the director of Rutgers Office of Veteran and Military Programs and Services, she is responsible for a comprehensive program of support services for veteran students at all Rutgers campuses. Ann is the principal advocate for student veterans, ensuring that the policies, programs, activities, and services provided enhance their educational experiences. She is also the university's liaison with outside agencies and offices whose work impacts the lives of veteran students. Ann earned her bachelor's degree from SUNY Purchase and her master's from CUNY College of Staten Island. She is actually a student herself, a doctoral candidate as well. And Ann kindly serves on Dean Lee's Military and Veteran Advisory Board. Welcome and thank you, Ann. I'm going to let you take things from here.
Margaret, thank you for that kind introduction. And as a doctoral student, that's why I look as tired as I do. Margie, I'm just going to jump right in and ask you a 2-in-1 question. How did you get into a civilian role in the military, and what influences has Rutgers had on your career?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. So first of all, thanks for having me today. It's great to be back on the virtual banks at least, and being able to talk about 2 of my passions, which is Rutgers and being a graduate of Rutgers, and the United States Navy, where I've spent about 16 years now. Directly following grad school, I came into the Navy and have made that kind of my second home. And I think both places, you really feel like home. When you're at Rutgers, you feel like you're part of a community. When you're in the Navy, you feel like you're part of a community, a family of sorts. And both are so big, but both also have their, little pockets of, specialized communities. And so I think that transition from Rutgers to an organization as big and complex as the Navy was super smooth because of that experience. But to your question, so at Rutgers, there were a couple things that I think just really set my ability to jump into the career world more than anything else. And they really became at the crux of where the study and the academics met the hands-on practical application. So I was a Eagleton Fellow as an undergraduate and as a graduate. Can't speak enough about that program and how connected it is to the state of New Jersey and to public service, from the nonprofit sector to the legislative side to the executive branch. Really felt that I had and into the judicial sector as well, although maybe a little bit more in the law school side for that. But Eagleton was fantastic because they brought in practitioners and they spoke about what it was really like to do it, and not just to have the science, the political science piece of it. Then at the Blaustein School, it's very similar. Our class projects were usually focused on serving a state constituent in some way, or about the hands-on application of, oh, that's really great, we say policy, but what does it mean in implementation, and how does that actually take effect? It's not like you write a memo and everybody listens to it the next day. And so that was really interesting to study, and then get to experience firsthand in the Navy for the last few years. There was also a program at Rutgers at the time. I think it's called something else now, or it's morphed, in the decade plus since I was there, but it was called CASE, and it was really about volunteering, and you had credits that you could get as a student if you did certain volunteer activities, which was actually really helpful. I had to, work to help pay for school, and so couldn't really take advantage of the non-paid internships and things as much as other folks. But that was another place where I got experience at a nonprofit, and how that worked, and what it really meant to develop advocacy for something and get other people on board. And the last thing at Rutgers was the daily Targum. And I think this is one of the coolest things about Rutgers is, you're part of this very real world bureaucracy of, of a system of ways to do things that you as a student aren't really given like a 101 manual to. You show up and you're like, okay, I have to go to the registrar, and that's over here. And this was probably, my undergraduate experience was in the early 2000s, so a little bit before we were completely digitized. Although we did eventually, I think, get off Telnet on the email system, which is good. But just through the Targum was able to see so many different aspects of the university and what it was doing, because I got to report about 2 or 3 stories a day through that experience, and just really saw the richness and the diversity that comes with, all these different pieces of this micro ecosystem. It's still huge. And so I think all those pieces contributed to, being able to come to the Navy, which I did through the Presidential Management Fellows Program. It was something where you apply in your graduate school year before you're going to graduate. You get invited to an interview process, in which then, if you pass, you get invited to another interview process, and it's kind of any agency can pick you up. And I wound up starting with the Navy down at Fleet Forces Command in Norfolk, Virginia. Quite a different experience to go from, the hub of New Brunswick, which was, very urban, New York City is very close, and that sort of thing, down to Southern Virginia and the hub of the Navy, where I didn't even know the difference between, officers and enlisted, and the different ship types, and there's aviators and there's submariners, and all these micro cultures. But the ability to see all that and experience all that at Rutgers was easy to translate into the Navy. So I'll stop there, long-winded way, but yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think that was a good, plug to really, to any students on here, to take advantage of all the opportunities that are on the campus, because it's more than you probably could imagine. You talked about the in-person interviewing. What do you think are the most important attributes of a successful leaders today? Oh
man, yeah. There's so many components of leadership today. I think the biggest thing is, the pace of change today is so great. And you see it in the Navy, where we have incredibly industrial processes and systems. I mean, it takes several years to build a ship or a submarine, or especially an aircraft carrier, even an airplane. And so you need those kind of industrial processes. But in the meantime, the information world is changing, so much more rapidly, and how you share information, and where technology is going, especially in data and analytics, and sensing and things like that. A leader has to understand how to deal with the pace of change. And I think this doesn't mean always changing, because there's another approach. You have to know when to hustle and keep up, and when to slow down, and to inject your best effort in targeted areas, as opposed to, always chasing the right thing. And being able to understand that the strategic environment, the things that are happening around you, and then choosing, where you're going to place your taco chips, your bets, and doing those incredibly well, whether that's personally or professionally, I think is a key skill. The other piece, which I think relates to the Rutgers reinvention kind of theme, is having a learning mindset. Because of this pace of change around us, we cannot be expected to have all of the answers all the time. And so recognizing, being a little humble, being curious about what's going on, and understanding that, you're going to have to experiment in some cases and potentially fail. And if you are learning through failure, that's as great of an accomplishment as if, you actually had the win, because it'll make you smarter. You'll go on stronger the next time. And so I think that ability to kind of self-assess yourself, your organization, figure out, what really needs improvement, be honest about that, is really key. I've got two more, if that's okay. One is one of problem-solving skills, and this sounds normal, right? Like, of course, you're a leader, you're problem-solving. I think it gets the resourcefulness piece of the Rutgers theme. We have an effort in the Navy right now to really go back to understanding and being fully transparent and embracing the red. We call it embrace the red. Something's wrong. We're not performing where we expect to be, where we want to be. And so let's be honest about that. Let's be transparent about that. And let's go figure out why, and not the surface symptomatic cause of why, but, peel back the layers of the onion, ask what, 5 whys, ask why 5 times. And when you get to the bottom, you're closer to root cause. And sometimes that means questioning our processes and our way of doing something. And sometimes it means questioning our culture, which, it's even harder. But doing that, you're setting yourself up for an even greater gain than if you just kind of said, oh no, everything's fine here. And, look at all the wonderful activity I have going on. And, so really understanding that kind of, outcome focus, and then being able to try new things if you're not really sure of how to close the gap. And then I think the final thing, although maybe this should be the first thing, is, how do you unleash the power of your people? And what I mean by that is, a lot of times I think as leaders or managers, we think our people should work, around us and around the way we do things. And in some cases, that's absolutely true. And in the military, that can absolutely be true, right? There are certain standards, and we're not going to have everyone, not wear uniforms for fun. So I think. So I think there's moments of that, but each individual sailor has incredible talents to bring. And you can see that, when you ask them questions, they're incredibly smart. They're good at what they do. They have ideas and opinions of how to get better. And so we really do have to think about how the organization and our approach to our people is really unleashing their talent. Are we allowing them to do their best work every day, and helping them grow beyond what they're capable of now? And that is a little bit about managing to the person, but it's also, I think, figuring out how to bring them along to some of their ability to perform at a higher level. So those are kind of the 4 things I would say, I think.
Well, it perfectly leads into this other question. What are the most important values you demonstrate as a leader?
Yeah, I think I'm a highly collaborative leader. I think because of that principle of I don't think I know everything. I'm very aware of being a political science grad. I just got my systems engineering, management master's like last year. So before that, I was a political scientist in a highly technical organization. I wouldn't even call myself a political scientist because I hadn't quite studied political science for a while. But and the Navy is a big organization, lots of personalities. As a civilian, as a younger, less experienced than a lot of the leaders I've worked around who have 20 or to 30 years in uniform, having grown up in the Navy and aware of the culture. Why should they listen to me, especially at face value, right? And so recognizing how do you bring people along, especially with differing perspectives? And in a bureaucracy, everything is very specialized, and you need that, right? Like, you want someone really concerned about the water tightness of every single screw on a submarine, and that person needs to do that. And you don't want that person involved in setting strategy. But at the same time, too many silos can start to complicate your ability to work cross-functionally and get things done. And so that's one of the things that I really value. And bringing along the human element of that is actually what I enjoy about working in such of a big system. Is that you're dealing with these incredible people who are all committed to the mission. Like, everybody comes to work today wanting to make the United States Navy the best Navy in the world. And where you have disagreements, you have to actually ask yourself, why do we have them? And bringing those folks together to have an honest conversation and to really figure out, okay, so how do we close the gap and solve the problem? is something that I enjoy doing.
I'm sure every submariner appreciates that, wanting that person to focus on the water tightness. What's the best advice you've received and from whom?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, let me start with the worst advice, maybe. And actually, the precursor to that is maybe one of the best advice that I've received. So when I was first in the Navy, maybe 2 years in, I was a super junior. I got an invitation to go work for the Chief of Naval Operations, which is like the member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, head of the Navy. I was in Norfolk. They wanted me to move to DC, and I went to my boss and I was like, I don't know what I would do. Am I going to build binders for this guy for the next 4 years? It's a 4-year appointment. And I was helping him with confirmation to get confirmed as the Chief of Naval Operations. And there really wasn't a clear job description where I was going, but I think he wanted to bring me up for continuity and for helping him with his strategy once he got up there. And my boss was like, no, don't go. He's like, you don't know what you're going to do and you should stay here. And we've got a job set for you. And I was like, okay, all right. I was like, well, let me go get another opinion. And I had gone to another senior civilian who I only worked with for about 9 months in a rotation. And she's like, Margie, if the Chief of Naval Operations asks you to do something, you do it. And I was like, yeah, but what if I'm building binders? She's like, then you're building them for the Chief of Naval Operations. And I just didn't understand the context, right? I mean, it took me years to fully understand the ability to have an impact at that level. But I think it's this dichotomy about best advice. And, my boss was talking to me through the lens of wanting me to contribute to the mission. He had hired me as a fellow and wanted to see me contribute to that command, didn't want me to go to DC, and was committed to mentoring me, which was great. But didn't provide the advice of, hey, this is an opportunity for you to grow and to broaden and, go take advantage of that experience. And so I think advice is very to the advice giver. You have to look at, through what frame are they providing advice? Do they know you? Do they know the context? Do they understand, what you're looking for at that moment? And so I've always kind of surrounded myself with multiple mentors and advisors so that I can always cross-check, look for themes and try to understand that from a broader perspective.
I absolutely agree. I think of having my own board of executives or directors that I generally go and bounce ideas off of, because not just one opinion. You wouldn't just, get one quote for maybe work you're having done. You would go to multiple places and feel out what the best one is. That kind of also leads into another question. So who do you look up to for inspiration or mentorship?
Yeah. Great question. So I think inspiration and mentorship are two different things. And there's a reason, because I think for inspiration, I've had the incredible honor of working for amazing leaders, from the Chief of Naval Operations to the current Vice Chief, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, multiple senior executives and flags in the Navy who have just so much experience, have led at high levels in incredibly complex situations. And each one of, I would say none of them is perfect, right? And we know this as humans, but I think in my, you get out of, school and you're like in the world and you're like, where's that perfect leader that I read about in all those books? And they really don't exist, but pieces of them do. And the inspiration piece, one of the cool things I had one of those leaders tell me was they keep a book, and in the back of the book, they write the names of the people that they want on their future fictitious team, and the skill set that they bring. So if I'm going to build the ideal team to take on whatever the problem might be, here are my people that are good at problem solving, leading people, finding money, right? Whatever it is, they kind of keep at least a mental list, right? It might be physical, but they keep a list of, all those pieces. And I think I've always kind of collected the best of people and, probably put unreasonable expectations on myself, but at least set them as, goals to say, in this area, model this person when you have to deliver bad news. I have an admiral that just is so good at delivering bad news, and not even bad news, but like, hey, you didn't really do your best work there, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about, you know, how we're going to fix it. And you don't feel like it's an attack on you. You feel like it's about problem solving, and he's part of the team that's going to help you, you know. And so I think inspiration, you know, is more of a web of sense. And I think mentorship is a web as well, kind of like what I said before. I think mentors, you know, my initial thought about mentors was that, oh, these are the people that are going to connect you to the next opportunity. And sometimes you need that, but most of the time, a good mentor is going to allow you to self-reflect, you know, understand, you know, challenge your comfort zone, and challenge your notion. You know, when you're bouncing ping pong balls in the back up in your head about, you know, what to do about something, your mentor is going to be able to help you clarify and simplify that, and in different ways. And that's why you need a diversity of mentors as well. The Navy is awesome for that, because we have so many people with different experiences that it's easy to kind of get a different perspective every once in a while.
I think I want an introduction to that admiral, actually. It goes back to what you were saying before a little bit about, you know, failure. And you know, there's a lot of people, especially leaders, who are afraid to fail, right? And the avoidance of that when you really could get something from it and learn from it. So in thinking of that, how do you continue to grow and develop as a leader?
Yeah. So I have this personal principle that I have to keep as a personal principle. And that is, whenever you are scared of doing something, you have to do it. And it sounds really bad, but and obviously you can choose to adhere to it or not according to self-will. But I've had the best opportunities when I have taken on something where I wasn't sure if I could do it. And it's required. Now, those types of opportunities require a lot of commitment, right? I mean, you're not going to go in and that's not for everybody. I have a 4-year-old. I was not ready for that kind of opportunity, you know, 4 years ago. That was not the kind of thing I was going to jump into. And so it's situational, of course, according to your personal and professional goals. But I think when you're not sure, it's a growth opportunity, and then you go into it eyes wide open. You know, I have strengths here. I need to lean on those in the first, you know, area. I have weaknesses here. I need to seek people out who are going to help me and that I can learn from them. And I need to ask a lot of questions. And so I think understanding where you can bring things, but where you can also learn from them is a great way to keep growing. And I think we were talking in the practice session beforehand, I'm an avid Googler. And so whenever I run into anything that I don't know, I'm like, well, let me read something about that. And let me just get a little bit smarter or find someone who is. Our current vice chief, who I work for, has an incredible best practice, I think, which is just, and maybe unique to the Navy, but whenever he sees an organization that's struggling with an issue similar to the Navy, or has overcome an issue similar to the Navy, he calls up the CEO and says, let's talk. And says, you know, you don't have to reveal your business secrets, but tell me about how you approach this. How did you think through change management, or, you know, performance improvement, or, you know, whatever it is. And we've had some incredible conversations with about 24 different CEOs, you know, from a variety of different companies, where we were able to, you know, just understand from their perspective, how do they do it? And sometimes it translates, sometimes it doesn't, but it's great to always be externally scanning and benchmarking.
It reminds me of a quote from a previous administrative assistant, actually, from another job I held, where they mentioned to me when I was leaving for my role at Rutgers that, you know, when you get there, watch the parade go by initially. And their point wasn't to immediately try all these things and, you know, maybe they've been done, maybe they haven't been done, but look at other examples. To your point, is there someone doing something similar? Also avid Googler, that's, you know, to reference back to that. I want to know if it already exists, why reinvent the wheel? Because I want to improve on what's already out there. So that makes perfect sense. You know, if you could, is there any decision you've made as a leader that you would go back and change?
Yeah, you know, I probably a million, but I actually believe that, you know, we go down a path for a reason, and we might not know it at the time, but invariably there's something that we gain along the way, and we might not know if we're going to use it now, but it'll come later. And, there is, in one of my jobs, I was standing up an office, and I've stood up 2 or 3 in the Navy, bringing different pieces together or pivoting to an area like data and analytics that didn't exist before. And, I had this great team, and I didn't know how to translate vision into action as effectively as I needed. The problem was huge. We didn't have a ton of resources. The right thing to do would have been to set very, very clear priorities. But there was just so much going on at the time that we didn't get a chance to do that. And I think, that lack of communication and clarity from the highest level leadership that was kind of setting the vision, to me, the best thing I could have done for the team was to say, okay, this is where we need your focus. These are the targets we need to hit. And this is the timeline that we're going to do that. Now let's run. And that frees up your people, so that one, all the churn that's happening above us, the leader can take on. I can take that on, right? And I can go to the meetings and say, hey, remember we set those targets, and we're still going to work on those. And so your people have that continuity, and you're not constantly changing direction. And then you can actually mentor them and help them, try to achieve those. And when they run into roadblocks, remove the barriers for them. And I think my approach to collaborative leadership, wanted to bring them in to shape the vision and to shape the targets. And they were kind of like, this problem is really big, and we don't really know where to go. And so being able to read that environment, I think I would have, taken a much more structured approach than a collaborative. I mean, it still would have been collaborative, but a much more structured approach and maybe scoped approach, especially leading a change effort that big. So that's one of them, I think.
Yeah, I feel as if I've had similar experiences and communication style and yes, the point where sometimes as a leader, you're the one who actually has to dictate and put confines on what you're doing, and that helps people. And then there are times to really push collaboration and bringing in ideas. It's really good advice. What 3 books can you recommend on leadership?
Yes. So did I mention I have a 4-year-old? So I haven't gone through complete books in a really long time. There's actually this awesome assessment when you're a leader in the Navy. The Navy gives you the Hogan assessment, and it's basically, I don't know how the heck they know these things about you and how you work, but it's a really good evaluation about, a whole bunch of different leadership attributes. And one of the leadership attributes that came back and told me was that you read for purpose, not for fun. And purpose and fun are very closely mixed in my life. But there are probably a couple. I had an admiral I worked for who he would give out books, Lincoln on Leadership. It's Donald, I forget his last name, but it's kind of like super quick. You can flip through it, and it's just a good, like, when you're in a leadership rut, or if you're need a refresh, you can flip through it, and it's fun to read about Lincoln and history, at least if you're in the military like I am. It's a great unifying concept. There's this really neat book that has stuck with me called Changing on the Job. It's I think Jennifer Garvey Berger or something like that. And the reason I like it, well, it's a little wonky. So, I mean, you're in for a couple chapters or one chapter at a time, or a couple pages at a time. But she starts off with adult professional development and the theories around adult professional development, and then talks about how different people are at different stages of that development, whether they're, self-focused, or whether they're, really more broad and open to learning. And then she goes through some steps for how to interact with people at different levels. And it was one of the eye-openers for me to realize not everybody is prepared to develop in the way that you want to develop them, or to lead them in the way that you want to lead them. And it's a great reflection of, how you can mix that, adult development psychology piece with the mechanics of work, and some tangible things around, how to step folks up, in different ways. And I think it just gives insight into the people side. And then there's this book Mindset by Carol Dweck. That's all about the learning mindset. And if you're interested in, okay, how do I go from being really confident in what I'm doing to showing this ability to learn, experiment, and fail, because it is such a hard thing. There's some good stuff there. So that's 3 books, but I think where I've gained the most about leadership is just the variety of articles, podcasts, LinkedIn links, things that are quick and targeted to the context in which you're leading at the time. And if you search like McKinsey, Deloitte, Harvard Business Review, ultimately, if you search the same topic, a couple themes are going to start coming out of whatever that literature is. And you can pretty much tell this is probably a best practice. And then those are the areas that I usually hone in on and say, okay, change management, this has a 5-point framework, this has a 10-point framework, but they're really all talking about the same 3 things, and then adapting that to your context, which is good.
With a 4-year-old, I thought the little engine that could was going to be, one of those overcoming adversity and making it over the mountain.
There's a whole ninja series, and so there is a growth mindset ninja, which we have read.
Okay. I have a twin 6-year-old boys, so my reading for pleasure is mainly in that realm. So I'm similar in that. Yeah. What are the most difficult decisions to make?
Oh man. I think they're the ones with people involved. Factual decisions, you have facts and that's what it is. And those are straightforward. Then there are the ones where you don't have all the facts and it's not really all that certain. And you kind of got to go with the best option and you weigh your choices and you pick. Those are hard, but there's usually some evidence or, even gut feeling about what to do. The easiest decisions are reversible decisions. And so whenever you can make a decision reversible, that's always great. But I think people, are the least forgiving. And so it's really hard to reverse decisions where you've gotten the people component of it wrong. And what I mean by that is, how you engage people and how you make decisions about them is a function of, both, their personality, their personal life, and then the professional needs of the organization. And when people give so much to their organization, it's really hard to detach the person from the organization. And I think, we see that in the military. You must see it with veterans and students as well, that, there's this tight connection between people and the organization, and being able to make sure that you're bringing people along with whatever the decision is. You always have to consider that element. And you might want to go down a path. We're in the middle of doing a kind of change management effort in the Navy, and thinking about the different constituencies and how we're going to make sure that people understand and are committed to the change that we want to do is absolutely key. And we want to run really fast, but we know that it's going to take time to get people on board and make sure that we fully understand their interests in it, so that they remain committed to the organization and what we're trying to do.
I think that segues really well into this next question. And it's also something you mentioned, I think, earlier about how change and fast pace change is. How do you achieve objectives in a fast paced environment?
I think a couple things. Communication, number one. I have seen the best successes and the worst failures, when communication has not matched. It's so hard because people want to move fast, but making sure that, what you want to do is clear, out loud to everyone. They understand it's not just in some single person's head or some group's head and that they're moving out and everyone else isn't. Being super clear on what the outcomes are that you want to do and not just the activities. The why is really important, especially I think to, the up and coming generations and their ability to, get on board. And then communication around, what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, what the targets are. And that does take time, but I think I don't know where the quote comes from. I think somebody in the audience will probably remember, but if you're given 60 minutes to do something, spend the first 40 on defining what you want done, and then give the last 20 minutes to your people to do it, as opposed to, hey, here's this big thing, go figure it out. And they come back and you only have 20 minutes to readjust. And so I think that's super key.
And this, again, ties into it, I think. How do you keep your team motivated despite obstacles and conflicts?
Yeah, I think in the Navy, the mission is super motivating, and so we do have this desire to improve and to be the best Navy in the world. There are competitor nations and navies out there that are getting better every day, and we know we need to improve. And so that motivation drives individuals and organizations. But I think the ability to set short-term and long-term milestones is key. And so, hey, what are we doing this quarter? Let's look to this quarter. And then I think treating learning as a win, hey, maybe we didn't hit the target, but this is what we learned and this is how we're going to do it better. And that's equally as motivating as, hitting the target. And so that, and I think, just building a strong, cohesive team that enjoys working together and doing tough things together.
How do you generate great ideas in your organization? Now, having been in the military and the bureaucracy, it's not a lot where you're going to tell superiors what to do. So how do you, when you have a great idea, promote that to someone who, is the decision maker?
Yeah, we have so many incredible ideas come from our sailors, that and the people closest to the problem, right? The people closest to the problem usually understand, what's not working, what could work, what might not work. It tends to be when we have the, higher headquarters that say, what we really need is, and this is a great idea. And then you finally get it to the implementation level. And so I think making sure that, the vision and the implementation idea are connected and real, tangible. In the Navy, I've actually been really impressed with how responsive we are to good ideas, that, regardless of where they come from. We've introduced design thinking in a lot of places where we can bring together folks from different organizations at different ranks, and have them come together and really think through a problem in different ways. I did a session like that just a couple months ago with a bunch of master chiefs who are kind of like the senior enlisted people in the Navy, and they gave great insights that we never would have considered if we had just looked at it from kind of a staff perspective or a admiral perspective. And all of that's kind of evidence collection in some way. As you get more people in and you start to run a pilot or run an experiment and say, hey, you don't have to adopt my big idea, but let me run with this piece and let me see if there's merit to it. And usually there's enough risk tolerance in our organization to be able to do small scale pilots, to learn from those and take an iterative approach, and test and see if it works before doing something big.
I want to make sure that we get time in for questions that are coming from the audience. So I'm going to read one, which, again, having been in not the Navy, but the Army, rings true because sometimes objectives are different. So how do you deal with the challenge of working with other organizations that might have similar overall objectives, but different processes and culture?
Oh, yeah. We run into that a lot. I mean, the Navy, about 3 or 4 years ago, realized that over the last decade, it had doubled the number of Super Hornet aircraft. These are our fighter jets, Top Gun. We had doubled the number of jets in the Navy, but we were only 50% of those jets were actually ready to deploy at any given time. And through different changes in leadership, we had lost sight of that trend. The military turns over every 2 to 3 years, military leadership. And so we weren't really tracking that. It was just getting worse and worse and worse. And we decided to do a pilot, and specifically on parts and how come it took so long for, parts to get to these aircraft to be maintained so that they could go back out again. we talked to the maintenance guys and they said one thing. We talked to the supply guys and they said another thing. Mostly they blamed each other, that it was the other person's fault. And so we just brought them together for 2 days. We said, okay, here's the problem. We don't have enough jets ready to go. They need to be more ready. Do you agree to that? They're like, yes, of course. Like, we've been trying to solve this problem forever. And we're like, okay, what's the problem? And they're like, well, the maintainers do this. And well, and the supply guys won't give us parts. And they're like, well, we give you parts, but you don't use them. Well, we have to send them back because they're broken. Wait, the parts are broken when you send them back? Like, how come you're sending bad parts? And then we had something to actually deep dive on. And we were able to track our system and how the system was not setting up these individuals for success because there was no way to take bad parts out of the system, or our benches that were testing them didn't have the right controls in place to pick up on the common errors that, you know, the fleet saw, but the folks back in the maintenance shop didn't get to see because the test procedure wasn't up to date. And excuse me. And so I feel like when you get the different stakeholders together, you outline that vision, and then you start to have conversations about it. You map the process flow. You look at, you know, what the competing factors are on a given problem. By the end of those 2 days, the supplier and maintainer parties were doing sidebars about how to help each other offline because they saw other areas that were broken and they wanted to understand more about it because they didn't understand each other's processes, or what really drove them. And then the organization, you know, was able to then remove that barrier. And we had a frustration at higher headquarters because we're like, well, how come people won't just solve this themselves? And it was just that they didn't have insight into some of the systemic things that were happening. And it actually led us down a huge data and analytic path to find the levers between supply, maintenance, manpower, you know, and a bunch of other factors of what would be most impactful to that problem set. And it's not easy. A lot of those changes that came required like Secretary of the Navy calling, you know, people to say, you will put this procedure in place because we're going to try it. And don't worry about the risk. We'll accept the risk at the headquarters level. And but it really required those people who understood the problem to you know, unpack it into it.
What's the most important risk you took and why?
Oh man. You know, the most important, there are risks. I think the most important risk I would say I take every day. And of all the big, you know, a lot of times we think of big risks, right? The most important is the biggest. I had incredible bosses early on in my career in the Navy who allowed me to express a different opinion about something. It wasn't, you know, and to allow me to ask questions about why we did things certain ways or how come, you know, something was different. You need to have that environment. But even when that environment didn't exist, I still pressed on that behavior because I thought it was important. And it is a risk because, you know, the organization does not value that at all times. And so you need to weigh, you know, when to do it. But I think having that as a core to make sure that transparency and that, you know, integrity to just really improving whatever it is that you're working on is there. And being willing to say, okay, I've identified a problem. Let me now go figure out what kind of solutions might I bring to the table, you know, so it's not just, you know, negative Nancy all the time being like, that's wrong and that's wrong and that's wrong. But it's, you know, hey, this is wrong and I think there's a way to fix it. And this is the first 2 steps I'd take, and, you know, much more receptive to that type of thing. And I do think that's a risk. And sometimes in the military it can be uncomfortable to encourage people to do that, but I think it's important.
And it ties into another question from someone in the audience. You know, when in leadership and making a decision, how do you reverse course while maintaining your team's confidence?
Oh, yeah. That's why I think the objective at the beginning is really important. Because if you're saying, hey, we're going to fundamentally change our North Star, you know, we were heading north and now we're going to go west. There's got to be a reason. The why behind that is key. If it's, you know, we're still heading north, but the course we were taking is not, you know, on path, then there's got to be some evidence around that. And we do this. It's funny. We take a different approach to resourcing. We do a 5-year budget every year in DoD. And so we're constantly building a budget for the next 5 years. And in that process, it takes about 9 months to do all that because there's so much, so many stakeholders and so much money. And so we're constantly making decisions on where to invest and course corrections on, we were going to buy the ship and now we're not. And it really forces you, to bring the data to the table on why are we doing that? What's the alternative? Did our concept of warfare change? Did the affordability change? Was it, a trade-off? There are winners and losers in every process, and we have to figure out how to do that. But the overarching mission of greater, lethality and greater range and greater support to the America's objectives, remains. And so bringing it back to that is really important.
This ties into this question as well, from another audience participant. How does the Navy approach innovation in warfighting? And so they give an example of unmanned vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully you've been reading about some of the unmanned task force and task force 59 stuff that we've been doing. Unfortunately, we didn't do it, 10 years ago, right? When all this kind of stuff was emerging, but maybe fortunately we waited for technology to mature a little bit. Innovation for us is challenging because we have a technology organization, an acquisition organization, and an operational organization, the fleet that actually do things. And aligning all three of those entities to really understand, okay, we can build it, that's great. Is it affordable to buy? Okay, yes. And does the fleet actually like it? And does it make a difference in what they're trying to do? And all those three pieces have to align for you really to get a resounding yes, let's go after it. And so right now we're experimenting a lot by just, taking in some prototypes, putting them in the hands of operators, getting some feedback, running business case analysis, and finding, ways to build that data around, is this a good bet to make or not? And in some cases we can pocket the innovation. And so, hey, in the 5th Fleet operating area that's over in the Middle East, the Central Command area, we're going to go after these types of systems and we're going to test them. And over in Europe, we're going to do something else. And in the Pacific, there's something else, and everybody has a different need. And so this idea of experimentation is key to us. Really great book, Learning War, by Trent Hone, talks about the Navy in between World War I and World War II, and how the organization went through this incredible period of change from battleship warfare to carrier warfare, and the people elements and the cultural elements, and all fueled by experimentation and just trying to cross train and cross populate different ideas, and the good bets rose to the top, and the other ones were like, okay, maybe later, and went back. And we have an incredible wargaming and experimentation apparatus that helps us do that. It's one of the more exciting areas to get into. And a lot of times you think, oh, Navy, it's just about the sailors, but a lot of we have an incredible technical workforce of scientists and engineers that get to work on this stuff as their day job, and they're in our warfare centers, and they're Navy civilians, and they just get to play around with technology and go out to sea with the gear too, which is really fun.
This is shifting gears a little bit. Specifically, did you find it hard being a woman within a very male-dominated area?
Yeah, I don't know if it was because I came in as a 23-year-old, no prior military experience, and so lots of internships, like I said, through Rutgers, but nothing military focused. And so for most of my career, I couldn't tell if I experienced different situations because I was a woman, because I was young, or because I was a civilian. All that stuff about, working with more senior people, 20, 30 years of experience, fleet experience. The Navy greatly values, operational command and command at sea and that sort of thing. And so I don't know, I've definitely experienced things where I've walked into a room where I'm the most senior person and, asked a question and someone says, well, who are you? And it was actually a really positive moment because everybody else in the room who knew me, the briefer didn't, but everyone else who knew was like, oh, what did you just do? Like, that's Miss Palmieri. Like, so they backed me up, which was great. And then the person, but it was a military person, an experienced, colonel captain that, and he wanted to know his audience, which is totally fine. So definitely have experienced those types of moments. Back to why I think the risk piece, greatest risk is not letting that, hold you back from saying, what you think is right or what you need to do. But I will say the Navy, I have had incredible opportunities in the Navy because even these senior military officials, they have been the ones that have put me in positions of growth more so than the senior executives, the civilian senior executives. Civilian senior executives were like, well, you have a career path, you have these ladders, maybe you do this, maybe you do that. And the military folks are like, I have a need, go here now. I don't know if I can do it. That's fine. You'll figure it out. Just because of the military culture, they're ready to put you in when they're ready. And so that's been a fantastic ride. But now, having gone pretty quickly through that progression, I am one of the few executives with very young children, and experiencing that, and being a female. My husband actually travels a bunch, so being a kind of primary caregiver as a female, that connection between mom and their kids, and then having to operate at that executive level has challenged me in new ways in the last 4 years than anything before that.
It is a lot to juggle. I relate to that. And how can students get into government service at Rutgers?
Yeah, so Eagleton is awesome. And I know there's a selection process for fellowships, but they have public events and, especially virtual events now where they bring in practitioners, and you can absolutely dial into that network. They are very well connected to the state network as well as federal. There's a Rutgers in Washington program that brings students to Rutgers, and they just started, I noticed, offering stipends, which is huge. I know I could never take advantage of that. I always had to kind of work through the summer to get books for the next year, but really awesome opportunity. Just come to DC, even if it's just to visit for a weekend, as a trip. All the museums are free. You can walk in, walk out, check out the Capitol, just see kind of the environment as an American citizen. I mean, this is your government working for you. Pentagon offers public tours if you want to come see that. But yeah, the Eagleton government or politics, I think it's Politics in American Government or something like that program. They would absolutely know more about it. There's Ready to Run series that they do in case you want to run for office, which everyone is super excited about doing these days. But if you want to throw yourself in the public domain, there's that type of thing. And the Blaustein School also, that's where I was introduced to the Presidential Management Fellows program. But if you're in the process of getting a master's and you're going to graduate, you're automatically eligible to apply for that ability to come into federal service. And it's a great program because you come in as like a GS 9 or 11. And so that's, a good starting place. It's not on the bottom. You're automatically guaranteed a promotion after a year. You get mentorship, you get training, all as part of that program. And then there's tons of internships. Find the agency you're interested in and just surf their website, look for internships, look for fellowship type things. I know the Naval Research Lab does fellowships or internships over the summer. If you're on the science side, it's just such a diverse place that you can absolutely apply your talent or your interest area to public service. I mean, even in the business world where you might think, marketing or, profit, management is not the same. And we don't have a bottom line in government. So it is all mission based, but that's part of the challenge. How do you deliver return on investment when you don't have shareholders? That your shareholders are the American people and the mission of the nation. And that's a really, for me, exciting problem to kind of work through.
Well, recently, President Holloway had launched the Rutgers Summer Service Internship Initiative, specifically giving students an opportunity to serve in these different ways and serve civic engagement.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good tie-in. We only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to make sure that you had, any last thoughts or something you wanted to, reiterate.
No, I mean, this was a great discussion. Thanks for having me. I hope something that I said today is useful to the audience. Rutgers is an amazing place and just has so many opportunities to get involved outside the classroom. And I think that type of experience has been so valuable to me. And we do have a lot of retirements. The federal workforce is aging, and so we're going to need really good people to come in, in the next few years to fill those positions, and not even from the bottom up, but at any time. We have awesome, like highly qualified expert tours where you can come in for 3 to 5 years and provide your expertise to an agency, just as a way to do that. Or the White House Fellows Program that brings people into government. We are constantly in need of refresh of ideas. The civilians can be called walruses because they get very ornery and protective of their turf. And one way to combat that is to always have a continuous refresh of ideas in government. And it's a challenging place to work, which makes it a fun place to work. And it's rewarding because you're working for your country and the people in it in different ways. So thanks for the opportunity to talk to the audience today, and best wishes for everyone on board and what you're doing. It's a unique time to be alive, I think.
Well, I would like to thank you both so much on behalf of Dean Lay, the lifelong learning team, and all of my colleagues at the business school. Thank you both so much for being here to reflect on your work and experiences and service and leadership with the government and the Navy. It was a great conversation, informative, relevant, really fantastic, and so much reflection of your time at Rutgers. I'd like to express a lot of gratitude to our fantastic audience for enhancing the discussion by tossing some questions your way, which were great. For 2022, the Rutgers Business School Signature Leadership Series will be held on the middle Wednesday of alternating months, midday, midweek, mid-month, and in the even numbered months of the year. And for more information, I'm going to read this. This is mostly for the people who are going to see this as a recording, because everyone else will receive reminders via email. business.rutgers.edu/alumni/lifelong-learning. The exciting schedule of topics and presenters that we have lined up is thanks to wonderful suggestions from our audience. We appreciate that, so we encourage you to keep sharing your great ideas, and that will help us keep the series to continue meeting your needs. So please stay online for just a few seconds longer as today's webinar ends, because you'll immediately see a very brief survey about today's event, and one of them is a free form field that you can type in topics and or speakers that you'd like to see featured in future webinars. Finally, as I mentioned when our webinar began earlier, a link to the archived recording of this presentation will be shared via social media and emailed to those who registered. We'd like to get your book recommendations, Margie, so that people were asking in the chat what they were. So we'll include those in that follow-up email, if that's okay. And the recording appears on the Business Insights page of our website as well. And our students, please, patience. I'm getting tons of messages in the chat about the QR code, and that will be available as soon as I end the recording right now. So thanks everyone, and bye for now.